Hey folks, good morning. This is Rick. So this next video, anyone that was been watching the channel understands that LaLa and I went up to North Carolina over this last weekend. We got some feeders, and I put a teaser into one of our posts a little bit earlier this week that we were getting one that would use the goat's appetite against them. So why do we? What's the big deal with why we wanted a new feeder? That's kind of what I've been asked. The problem is feeding goats. Anyone who's done it in the past will realize that sometimes that's not an easy task if you're trying to feed them in a small space. So LaLa feeds the goats twice a day, in the morning and in the evening. Small supplementation. Other than that, they're on browse. So what browse means is we have essentially the goats are fenced into 7 acres, and if you look behind me, that's a small portion of where those goats are primarily. Their principal food source. They wander through our pastures and they eat weeds. I mean, it's a common misperception that goats eat grass and they'll mow your yard for you. Well, they will if that's all they have to eat. They mostly eat what's called browse. They forage a lot and they eat a lot. So you can see way back in the distance, there's a lot of forage back there, but up closer to the barn, up in this area, you don't see a whole lot because they've kind of cleared this up here until the leaves grow back. They're not going to, they basically have moved on to a different area. But if you move not too far away, over here, for example, you can see there's still a lot of goldenrod. They really haven't touched any of the pine tree needles. Pine tree needles are really great, as well as the bark for goats, because that's a natural parasitic prevention for them for worms. But this is the main doe pen, and you can see they can't even begin to put a dent in this, but they have up closer to the barn. So brings me back to the feeder issue. Why? So when you feed a goat in the morning, they are driven, or when you feed a goat anytime, we give them, like I said, a small supplementation. I think about a ½ pound per head per day is essentially what we feed. Because we don't want to make grain their primary food source. Their primary food source is what they can naturally get through browse. We're going to be feeding them a little bit more as we go into winter. We just put up, I think, 50, 60 bales into the barn last week, because we're going to be going into winter. And even in Florida, you get a lot of variation in what's available green-wise out in your pastures. A lot of this depends on how much rain we get. If we get a lot of rain, then they'll continue to have browse through winter. But some of the flowers and weeds that only grow when it's really warm will not be available to them. So we will be supplementing them with a little bit of grain, again, the ½ pound a day, but primarily giving them hay over winter. But that little ½ pound a day is really the problematic thing of what we're talking about here. That ½ pound a day of grain, they absolutely love grain. So we wanted a feeder that would allow us to put a bulk amount of feed into the feeder and then go away for a few days at a time. Second, we wanted something that would prevent LaLa from getting mobbed every day when she would go out and feed the goats. Now, what do I mean by mobbed? I'm going to do a little video of what I mean by mobbed. So stand by. These are our unbred does, or ones that we held back from breeding for this breeding season. So this will illustrate what I'm talking about. It's the goat mob. And this is pretty mild for what they generally will do. You only had a couple of them jump up on her. Well, when you got a 120-pound wether, which is Chewy there in the middle, or Fancy down on the end. She's one of our confirmed pregnant does. Jumping on you, you know that you lose your balance pretty quick. See, here's one of the problems too. If you look in here where Sigurd's eating, Sigurd's starting to pick up that feeder just by bumping it with their head. There, it fell back down. That's one of the problems that we've been having is, well, there they go and hit it again. So now Fricka's, the red one, there, has come up through the boards and is now trying to eat by coming in under it. So these are some of the problems that we're having. So Fricka runs the risk of, get out of there, runs the risk of getting hurt.
Fricka's always in trouble though.
Here comes Helga, same thing, kind of coming in. That's not how these are designed to work, but goat's appetite guides everything they do. And so we want to try to fix that the best that we can by finding a feeder solution. So what we have done is we have purchased, after extensive research, there goes Fricka, she's changing positions. We have purchased the Advantage 200 HD feeders. We went to North Carolina this week to pick them up. And while I was there, we had the opportunity to talk to Brooke, who delivered them to me, and she was kind enough to go through and talk about the feeder. So she spent extensive time just talking about the advantages of the Advantage feeder, no pun intended. Hey folks, I'm here. This is Rick. I'm here with Brooke Hardy, who is the distributor for this feeder that I kind of gave you the teaser about earlier this week. This bulk feeder that we're going to be putting in for our does. So actually we can leave now town without having to feed these goats twice a day. So Brooke's going to kind of give you the rundown about this feeder, and I told her she could do an unabashed promotion of her distributor company. So but she's going to show you what it is and why it works.
Okay, guys, this is the smallest Advantage feeder we have. We have several that are larger up, but this is the one that's more convenient for people because you can put this in the stall. The recommended amount of goats that you would put on this feeder would be 20, no more than 20. And this is a feeder system that is based off the saliva of the goat. So what the goat does is the goat would come up to the feeder, and the goat actually has to stick its tongue in this little groove area, and up above you can feel, well, we can feel, but there is a little area up in here where the goat actually gets the feed from.
So they can't just put their lips in this and eat as much as they would like they would any other feeder.
No, and just like when you pour out feed and the goats step in it and then they won't eat it and it wastes feed, the feed actually doesn't come down into this area. It was only in the small area here. And so the goat actually has to stick their tongue up in there. If their tongue is wet with saliva, they will be able to pull the feed out. If their tongue is not wet, they can't get the feed, and so they have to walk away until their saliva builds back up.
How long does that take generally?
Usually about 5 minutes, their saliva will dry out. We have these feeders currently in our barn in 5 different areas. You never see more than 2 does at the feeder at a time. They walk up, they eat, and they walk away.
So they can't overeat then?
They cannot overeat. This is just like your typical feeders. This is a guard that keeps them from going up and down the feeder. Of course, with this being so small, you don't necessarily have that anyway where they're running them up and down, but this just helps to keep the goats from running up and down. I'm going to take this off just briefly just to kind of show you some adjustments. You can adjust as to how much feed you want your goats to eat at one time based on 2 different control areas. One being these 2 bolts here. If you'll notice on the side, it has a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. When you adjust these bolts with the piece that comes attached, it fits in the side of your feeder right over here and hangs so you never lose it. Wow. So they've kind of thought of everything, but you can adjust this to make it, of course, lower or higher, and I'm having a hard time here, but it is really easy actually. But if you notice when I do this, I can move this down, more food can come down. The other adjustment side is on either side. You'll see these handles with a little adjustment knob here. It also has a number system here. The more that you open this up, I'm going to open this up and I'll show you by pulling up the handle. When I adjust this, if you notice the panel going up.
Oh, okay.
And then
this panel here
this panel
slides
is
up.
sliding up and down. So that allows more food to drop down.
Okay.
This would allow more space for the food to go in order for the does to get access to more feed at one time.
So it's really just kind of making the appropriate adjustments to fit your needs on your herd, and then after that, it's just kind of leave it as is, unless there's some compelling reason to feed them more.
And every herd is different. We talk about that a lot. It does. Those two adjustments help determine how much feed you actually want to give your animals at one time. The device also comes with a cleaning tool. The one thing that we do recommend, you fill the feeder up, and about once a week you take this tool with the little notch here and you just kind of scrape it all along here.
And that's cleaning the spit off.
That is just cleaning, yeah, any additional spit. Sometimes it'll get gooked up if you, depending on the type of feed you have. It may get gunked up just a little bit, like in one area, not flowing as good. So I just kind of take this, knock it down. This is also just a scraping tool if you want to raise it up and really scrape. Doesn't really get you know, dirty that often. You may see a little bit of feed here. That's what's dropping off their tongue to get into their mouth. I just scrape that out. It's nothing in comparison.
But anything that drops down into this lower area, they can just eat that like they would. They can eat it
if they wanted to, but it's kind of like the feeders that you see that you fill up and they step on, and the gook and stuff. They're not going to eat it.
Right.
You wasted feed. But this amount is going to be so much smaller than what you were used to before. You fill it up, you don't have to worry about it.
How many pounds does this hold?
This feeder holds, I believe it's 200 pounds of feed, if I'm not mistaken. This one's 200.
So on the sides, we've got just a couple of latches that allow you to open it up.
Yeah, I should explain to you too. It's got a little window that you can kind of gauge as to the amount of feed that you have in there without having to open up the device. But you do, if you open it up, it has a, I haven't done the other side. Look, you got it unlocked there. And I'm short, so I'm gonna climb up here. But once you open it up on the inside, you will notice that, you'll notice it has a gauge. So it is 200 pounds of feed. So you can kind of gauge as to how much your goats are eating. With every feed, we like to say whether it's pelleted or it is a textured feed, you're not really sure how much the feeder is going to let out. We can't really judge it because everybody's feed is different. But if you look at this, we recommend putting like 50 pounds of feed in at one time, setting your gauges typically on what we give you as a setting, and then try that and see if it's feeding them too much, if they're going through it really quick, or if they're not going through it fast enough.
So you got a window on both sides.
Yes, window on both sides. I will say, and that has these.
And on the back side, we've got the mounting system.
This is the mounting system, and what you do is you can hook it onto your fence very easily. It's got clips again down here at the bottom. Take these up very easily. You put your 2x4s in here on your fence, and then just simply put this through.
Very cool.
And you can just latch it down on the bottom.
So that's the one thing I wasn't sure how we were going to mount these things. Well, that makes it really simple.
Makes it really easy. Another thing we recommend is I'm assuming in the Kiko industry we do boars, but we like to build up the muscle in their rear legs. And so what we recommend is
get up on them back legs
a little bit higher, and either putting center blocks or something down lower so that they actually have to step up onto something to eat out of the feeder. So it builds up that. This is also on the inside lid. It gives you information about the product, the setting gauges, and then this gives you lower adjustment guide, upper adjustment guide. This is for cows, then down here is for sheep and goats as to how much you want them to eat per day. So these are the adjustments. And this is per head per day with Advantage feeders. And I think that may be about it. The only thing I will say is in closing with this little tool, if you ever want to bucket feed again or miss the fact that your goats are not coming up and knocking you over, grab this tool.
Okay.
Because when they see you cleaning, you're knocking down food. So it is a free-for-all. Let me fight. I don't have to work to get. So
you're talking about how much of a creature of habit these goats are.
That is exactly right. So, and I am the lucky one out of my family to get to do this all the time. My husband fills them up, and I get to clean them and maintain them. But if you ever want to go back to the day of bucket feeding and goats fighting over the food, take the tool in your hand and walk up to the feeder because they are coming after you. But that is it. We go out of town every single weekend. We have been out out of town every single weekend since August 4th because our kids showing all the fairs. I actually, on our 200 feeder, I will tell you this, I don't use this guard because we don't have the problem with fighting, and that's, you know, of course what these were designed for is so they don't run up and down. To me, it helps a little bit, and I will tell you why when we put this back in here.
Now it looks like it's reversible. Does it serve two different purposes?
No.
Or it's the same design both ways?
It is the same design both ways, but if you notice when I stick it in this way, and I'll show you quickly, when you stick it in this way, how closed this area is.
Right.
So you can flip it over, and without having to adjust your settings, we keep all of ours on our big feeders on this side of the device.
Okay.
And you see how big and open this is without having to notch our feeders down or our adjustments down.
So that tool, when you go and clean it and knock some of that stuff down, gives them some extra. It's like goat treats.
It does. They're going to come at you when you clean it because they know this is their food system. But I've just found, and these are on the bigger feeders as well, that me trying to battle this thing to get it out is not a good thing. So I do hang it on the side. On the bigger feeders, I have a little place that I put it up on the top.
Yeah, anyone who's ever fed a group of goats coming in that are hungry will appreciate what she's talking about, because they will crowd you out for that food and step on you to get to that food.
In between your legs, wherever they can. I have one that climbs in between my legs every time I go to feed. But they have adjusted these feeders a little bit. The handle is now in, whereas before it was out, and the goats were rubbing their horns on it and their heads and breaking it off.
Right.
So these are adjusted. They're more, if you hear someone talk about they've had one and the handle broke off, it was because of the design before. So they have a better design now with this handle going in. The goats will still rub their heads on it, but nothing to take this piece off.
Have you had any issue with buck size, the horns on a buck coming in?
We have not. We do not use these on our big bucks, only because they weren't raised on them. I think with our buck in particular, anything new we introduce in his barn, he decides to demolish.
Okay, and
he doesn't like new things put in, so we have not tried it on him.
That's some of the questions that that's one of the main questions we were asked, is how the bucks beat it up, and how sturdy is it for that purpose?
Now, our younger bucks that have been raised on them do not do anything with it.
Okay.
They have been known to kind of headbutt it, but I will tell you what several people have done to help protect theirs. They have actually built their fence around it by putting wood up, and this being the only opening to get into for their bucks. With our younger bucks, of course, they are using it and they feed on it every single day. We do have some big does that are as big as some of our, bucks. 250 pounds is one of our does, and she doesn't, bother it at all.
So you just have boar goats?
We only have boars, and right now we do have some dairy goats that are on it as well, that are surrogate moms for our boars. And we do have a couple of Kikos that they're using also as surrogate moms that have been on them, and they work fine. I'll tell you, the best part is, the reason why we do have 80 goats is because of these. If I had to go feed 80 goats, I would not have goats. My husband would be out of the goat business probably. I was just getting beat up, and he's a fireman, so he works every third day, 24 hours, he's gone. And so I'm in charge of taking care of everyone. And so this is what has kind of allowed him to buy more goats, me buy more goats, and we can also go out of town. And we don't have to worry, when you put 200 pounds of feed out, and they can't eat it all in one whack or make a mess with it in one whack and step on it and then not want to eat it.
Yeah, they're smart. They know those sounds associated with feeding. So this is just fill it up one time, and you don't have to worry about them fighting you every time.
No, and when you can just go by and you don't even have to worry about taking a lid off, you can look in that little side glass and judge and say, hey, look, we're almost out of feed, we need to fill it up. Lots of times we'll fill it up at night too. They're out sleeping, and we can go in and fill up all the feeders. Some of them will come, some of them don't even care, but great advantage to feeding. I don't have to go down and feed. I think we have 3 goats that we actually feed right now.
Outstanding.
And the rest of them are all on a feeder system, so they go around, they eat, and we just fill up the feeders.
Well, that's certainly how we're going to be using this. This is going to be, we've got a barn, and we have our pastures kind of segregated into 4 different pastures, quadrants if you will, and we're going to have one of these feeders on each of the corners, so that depending upon how we have our goats segregated by group, they believe each one will have access to one of these feeders. The plan was, now I might be second guessing this now, is to actually put one with the bucks as well. We'll see how that works out and give her some feedback on that.
Absolutely. You know, it just depends on your temperament of your bugs.
Well, ours are not aggressive, but they certainly don't like to be touched.
Oh, okay. Well, ours is very aggressive. I will tell you, ours is broken out of our barn.
Wow.
We had 3 strands of electrical wire, and he took out all 3 strands in our pasture. So he's just one of those that anything new or something he doesn't like, and he's taking it out.
Both of our bucks are relatively young. They're not, I mean, literally about 9.5 months old.
Oh, I think
And
they're
so, you know, they still are pretty adaptable. So we
Right.
might try it with that, and then start the babies on those as soon as they're born.
Well, I will say we do have people that have put it with their bucks, even though we haven't necessarily recommended it, and we've never had any issues. They do come with a 2-year warranty.
Okay.
So that's another thing, as long as it's not just misuse of it. And during that time, we've had 2 that have come back. That being all the 1200s we've sold and all the 200s we've sold. And the only reason why they came back was the initial first generation of the 200s with the handle.
It was related to the handle here.
It was related to handle. One of them was related to a faulty piece here that broke off. But as far as anything else, we have not had an issue. And that's
Well, this will work well for our current configuration. The current configuration has 2x6s, and then we use the typical Tractor Supply ones that just kind of hang over the board.
Right.
And first thing they do is they come up and hit it with their head, and the food goes everywhere.
Yeah. Do you
So-
have the ones that have the little
Yes.
metal wire?
Yep.
Okay, yep. We
Yep.
have those that hit it, they knock it down.
So-
we tried screwing it in, which doesn't work, because if anything gets wet or it gets nasty, trying to clean that thing out, you have to take your
Yep.
hand and scoop it.
Yep.
And as soon as you're up there, just like with the cleaning tool, as soon as you're up there, they're attacking you to try and get the food. We had those for a while. We even bought the feeders that go on the ground and have the pole in the top, so supposedly they don't climb in it. They still climb in it. They poop in it. It's on the ground. And we're wasting feed because we're cleaning it out, the stuff that they won't eat.
Well-
I will, with me, a lot of people do say this too. The way they notice their goats are off feed is because they're not coming to the feeder. What I would recommend, and what we kind of do, is I still get attacked every once in a while. My husband will not do this, but I feed them animal cookies.
Right. Well, that's how we. That's like
do.
we call it. My wife calls it goat crack.
Yep, that's it. So what I do is, I will go down there and I will feed out animal cookies. If I notice a goat's not coming to me for animal cookies, that's how I determine that they're not there. Because people said, if I notice they don't come to the feeder, that's how I determine something's not right with them.
They're not goat cookies, by the way. They're more giraffes than zoo animals. So we're not giving. It's not like cookie cannibalism or nothing. Well, outstanding. Any closing comments? How the people can reach you again?
They can contact us. My husband is probably the best way, or you can go to Advantage Feeders, and they will send you in our direction. If you contact the company, they'll tell you Brian is the distributor. Again, our number is 828-234-3966, and he can explain anything. He loves doing that. I can send out information to your email account if you want a product catalog. Or
what's your email?
Our email is hncborgoatfarm@gmail.com.
So H, the word and, or HNC?
It's the word and.
So-
HNC, HNC Boar Goat Farm, and boar is spelled BOER for those of you who are not in the boar industry. But HNC Boar Goat Farm at gmail.com is a way to get us, as well as my husband Brian Hardy. You can contact him, or on Facebook, HNC Boar Goat Farm. And we can get you any kind of information that you need.
And we went through a pretty exhaustive search over last year looking for a feeder that would be functional, that also had good consumer reviews, and this is the one that fit that bill. So we did all of our research on this over several months before we ever contacted Advantage Feeders, and so now we've purchased 4 of them. They're delivering 3 today, and we got 1 more that's going to be shipped to us. So, all right, well, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you.
So the same day we got back from North Carolina, we proceeded with installing the first of the feeders that we had purchased. We didn't put all of them up because we wanted to make sure we get the first install correct in terms of height and the feed adjustments. So we only put the first one up to try to make sure we get that one right and use that kind of as the model for the other 3. So kind of what we expected to happen is what happened. The does are used to kind of mobbing that feed area to get kind of hoard the food, get everything that they can.
And they did the same exact thing with this feeder. So several of them started tussling for the pole position, if you will, exactly what they do when they have the standard feeders that we hang on the wood rail. So that's exactly what we expected to happen. But just as advertised, over time they started walking away from it after just a few minutes. So after about 5-6 minutes or so, what we saw is the larger does began to just walk away from the feeder, which allowed some of the smaller does, such as Helga, the smaller one that you see kind of poking her head up there, began to be able to feed out of the feeder. So it was really interesting to kind of see them voluntarily walk away from this feeder. That's not something we're used to seeing, because they will lick every morsel out of the more traditional feeders that we have used over the past 2 years. So this took about 5 or 6 minutes or so for the larger ones to just begin walking away.
So there you go. We've got our feeder installed. Kind of give you some idea about how, given this configuration, you can see they've kind of, initially they were crowding around the feeder because I think they got to fight for food, but then they just wander away, just like is advertised. So the only one that has really kind of stuck with it is Chewy, and that's our primary. He's the older wether that we have on the farm, and that's who's at the feeder right now. And Chewy's just a food hog. You'll see that he kind of defends his food. The only one that he can't, that he doesn't stand up to, is really the primary herd doe. And she is now in with one of our bucks, so you don't see her, because she'd whip up on Chewy butt quick, because no one challenges her for food, including him. She's about 1.5 times his size, and she don't take no bull from, or no goat from anybody. Maybe I guess you would say no bull from anybody, or from any of the others. So hope you enjoyed the video. But the primary reasons we got this was threefold. Number one, to kind of limit their indulgence on grains, and we don't feed a lot of grains. Most of their food comes from forage and browse around the property. Again, you know, here's we've got a lot. We've got about 7 acres that they can't no way keep up with that. So that's their main food source. But this is for supplementation, vitamins, minerals, and then so they don't get very much. It's about 1/2 pound per head per day is about what we feed them. And again, too much grain can put too much fat on your goats, and just like humans, too much fat can lead to some health problems with them. The other main reason is that if they do overindulge themselves, they can come down with what's called acidosis. Acidosis can really be fatal to goats. It causes problems in their GI tract and can cause them to die within a matter of days if they overindulge themselves too much. This controls that, and the primary reason that third primary reason that we got this was really to allow LaLa and I to do some more traveling. We used to take some motorcycle trips, and since we started building this goat foundation herd a couple of years ago, we've done a lot less motorcycle rides, and we want to get back to that. So this will allow us to do that without having to worry about feeding the goats twice a day, watering them, etc., etc. The chickens, they kind of maintain themselves, so it was really feeding the goats that was the big issue. So hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel if you liked it. We're trying to build traffic through the channel, so subscribe to us. We'd very, very, very much appreciate that. If you got any questions, put them in the comment section below, and see you on the next video. Be well.